the June 28th, 2022 Board of Trustees meeting. Do I hear a motion to enter into executive session?
Madam Chair, I move that the board enter into executive session to consider employment recommendations for the 2022-2023 academic school year.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Powers. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. We will enter executive session and we will see y'all in a few minutes.
better chairs up there. These things gonna kill me one day.
Well, you have to be careful that it's locked, or it'll flip you back.
Do I hear a motion to conclude executive session and return to general session?
I so move.
Thank you, Mr. Oswald. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Henson. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries. I call to order the general session of the June 28th board meeting. The district is in compliance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act by notifying the media of the date, time, and place of the meeting. The district tapes the meeting for accuracy in preparing the minutes. At this time, I yield the floor to Dr. Kyle Guyton to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Madam Chair, fellow board members, staff, and guests, please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Madam Chair, move the board approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Powers. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Is there any discussion? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Do I hear a motion that the board approve 13 certified recommendations for the 2022-2023 academic year?
Madam Chair, I move that the board approve 13 certified recommendations for the 2022-23 academic year.
Thank you, Mr. Oswald. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Powers. Is there any discussion? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Do I hear a motion that the board approve 3 administrative recommendations for the 2022-2023 academic year?
I move that the board approve 3 administrative recommendations for the 2022-2023 academic school year.
Thank you, Mr. Oswald. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Powers. Is there any discussion? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Do I hear a motion for the board to accept the newly hired support staff report for 2021-2022 and 2022-2023 as presented by administration?
Madam Chair, I move that the board accept the newly hired support staff reports for 2022-2023 as presented by administration.
Thank you, Mr. Oswald. Do I have a second?
Second.
Do we have, are there recommendations for 2021, 2022 for support? There are none? Okay. All right. Thank you for the clarification. All right. Is there any discussion? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries. Do I hear a motion that the board approve recommendations of the District Instructional Materials Adoption Committees as district adopted instructional materials for 2022-2023?
Madam Chair, I move the board approve the recommendations of the District Instructional Materials Adoption Committees as district-adopted instructional materials for 2022-2023, elementary and middle school science, elementary and middle school social studies, high school social studies, advanced placement AP social studies.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Powers. Ms. Gaskin, would you like to talk us through what this is?
Sure. Contingent on funding, instructional materials are on about a staggered 6-year cycle for being updated, and that is aligned with the review and the revision of academic standards. And so you see social studies and science materials on the list today because we have updated standards in those 2 areas. Social studies in 2019, last year was our first full year of implementation, and science in 2021 with 23-24 being the first year of full implementation, but we've already made great progress in moving towards those updated standards in LEX 1.
Thank you very much. Board, do you have any questions for Ms. Gaskins? Nope. All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Do I hear a motion that the board approve the amendment to the fiscal year 2022-2023 general fund operating budget?
Madam Chair, I move that the board approve the amendment to the fiscal year 2022-2023 general fund operating budget to recognize the net decrease in general fund revenue of $6,669,500, with a decrease being covered by an increase in the same amount from the operational fund balance.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Powers. Mr. Salters, would you like to walk us through this amendment?
Yes, Madam Chair. Briefly, I'll take your attention to the screen here. As you recall, that we passed the budget recently at our third reading with an amendment, a small amendment on the expenditure side, and we indicated to you during that time frame that we built the budget off the Senate version of the revenue, and we had hoped to have a better picture of that revenue stream going forward, and we've gotten that now. And you know, what's left out there, I guess, is for the bodies to come back and look at vetoes that the governor did. And so we don't anticipate any of that to have any significant impact on the revenue estimates that we've gotten. We did see a $6.7 million decrease from the Senate version of the projected revenue. And, you know, the key there, too, is that they did stick with the $4,000 in this increase in the state minimum teacher salary schedule instead of the $2,000. However, we'd already built that into our budget on the expenditure side, so we didn't. We're very comfortable with our salary schedule. So really, all we're looking at is recognizing this revenue adjustment. So our revenue goes down, and I'm pointing to this number because this is kind of where it stands out. The revenue goes down by this $6.6 million, and our recommendation is we take that from our operational balance, and that operational balance unassigned currently is sitting at about $70 million, and we're still finalizing this fiscal year, obviously, but we do anticipate having some, slight surplus at the end of this year that would offset some of that as well, but we don't have details of that yet. But we're not concerned at all about that being taken out of our operational balance, as opposed to doing a millage increase or some other expenditure cut. So we're comfortable moving forward with the budget on the expenditure side as you approved at our previous meeting, and just make this adjustment on the revenue side to match the expenditures.
And I think it would not compromise any of our debt offerings by reducing the fund balance by that. It wouldn't change.
No, sir.
Okay.
No, that's not significant.
Okay.
Or does anyone else have a question for Mr. Salters?
I just have one question. So I know the budget changes from year to year, what we get from the state. Is this something we can expect going forward? Like the base, like what we received this year, next year, can we kind of expect like, okay, we're going to be looking at about the same amount that we got this year?
I think that's a good starting point for sure.
Okay,
If you're referring to state revenue,
right.
But it's it's a moving target every year. The legislature gets together and the governor and they decide what's what it looks like. So this year they changed the funding formula, and but it's really up to the legislature to make those determinations. They use information from the Board of Economic Advisors and the projections on state revenue as a whole to derive some of their work. So it really depends each year, but that's a good reference point.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Well, and what I would say is that team can't affect that. This team can. So we need to be interacting with our delegation and talk to them. And I hope all of us are doing that. So.
Yeah, also looking forward, I mean, going into next year, if we know that we're going to have to be using $6 million of fund balance, that's a conversation we need to be having going into next year.
Yeah, but we always use fund balance.
Yeah.
And again, we've used more than that. I mean, it bounces between 8 to 12 million.
Historically, we have budgeted that as a line item, and you can go back and look, and the district has not actually dipped into that line item. We've had surplus, as you pointed out, Ms. Garris, before. And certainly we're taking measures over the course of my time as CFO, and I know Ms. Miller will look into other ways as well to get that surplus as tight as possible. But you certainly hope you don't have to use that, but it is there if needed.
And when you said potential surpluses, you're talking from local sources, correct?
No, it's overall budget.
You're saying our expenses for this budget year is gonna come in less, if you think about the FTE openings and stuff?
Right.
It's just the overall budget to.
Okay, I didn't know if you're talking about increased revenue or decreased expense.
I mean, it could be either one.
Okay, gotcha.
Oh, your point's fair, tax revenue.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
correct.
It's higher than expected.
Yeah.
I mean, a surplus can be generated from a number of different sources. Either decrease of an expenditure that you weren't expecting, or increases in revenue that you weren't expecting. Because they're all projections.
All right, anyone else? All right, turn to the motion on the table. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. All right. All right, at this time, I am going to turn over our agenda to Mr. Scott Price and the SCSBA staff, which is the incredible Judy LeGrand, and she's really the one driving this. I don't know why I'm turning it over to Scott, but Ms. Judy LeGrand and Dr. Jean Moore, and they're going to provide us with the feedback from the surveys, focus groups, and community meetings to help us focus our search for the next superintendent.
All right, and good morning, Madam Chair, and good morning, members of the board. As the chair has pointed out, yes, the brains of the operations are on both sides of me, but I'll be just kind of giving you an overview of the survey results, because again, that's what the purpose of our being here today is, to give you the results of the survey and the focus groups and the community meetings that we were conducted over the past month. And I will say that we did 21 focus groups. This was focus groups that included community members, community leaders, business organizations, district personnel, et cetera. And we also conducted 4 community meetings at the various high schools. And part of the process was to, of course, get input from the community as to what they would like to see in terms of characteristics of the next superintendent for Lexington 1. But it was also an opportunity for us to sit down, sometimes in small settings, and just talk about the process itself and answer questions. So it's a kind of an exchange of information. But we were able to get, I think we had on the electronic survey that we did, we received over 2,500 results from people who took the survey, which is outstanding in terms of community input and response. And there were some 860 comments that accommodated or came along with those electronic survey results. So at this time, and you should have a copy of that in front of you, and at this time, I'll turn it over to Judy to sort of walk you through the survey results.
Okay. So glad that we could be with you all today. You see it's a pretty healthy document in front of you. So I'm not going to sit here and read it to you word for word. It would be a good thing, get you a cup of coffee, maybe 2, and sit and read through it. We did have, between focus groups and community meetings, approximately 155 people. If you look on page 3, it gives you a breakdown by group. Some of those were in person. The majority were via Zoom. And as Scott said, a lot of times it was just a handful of people, but it was good conversation to get a pulse of how staff members and community members feel about, the needs and the qualities that you should look for. With 2,586 responses to an online survey and 155 people discussion, that's not the majority of your community. So, but it does give you an idea of what people are thinking. So you can't really base the whole community on the responses here but it does give you a good snapshot. And it's something that you should keep in mind as you're, later when we bring you the pool of candidates, keep these qualities and characteristics in mind as you look at these people. And it's also something when you name your next superintendent, that he or she can use to move forward to see what the community is looking for. When we met with each group, we did kind of give an overview of the process so that everyone understood, what the steps would be taking place. And then we just posed the question, what are the characteristics, qualities, and experiences that the board should be looking for in the next superintendent? And what you have over the next several pages, page 4 through 15, it's just an alphabetical list of the qualities that people gave at these meetings. And then on page 15, I just did kind of a summary or a consistent themes that came across at every meeting. I mean, you heard a lot of the same things repeated. Of course, adaptable, active member in the community, an advocate, ambassador, caring, compassionate, engaging, decisive, innovative, integrity, motivational, person of conviction, strong, thick-skinned, came up several times, transparent, a unifier, visible, visionary, welcoming. Then on page 16, something that came out in a lot of the meetings, this is, just a kind of some bullet points of things that the next superintendent should have, and then priority issues that they might face. Several groups mentioned, the ability to set long-range goals and plans. Your foreign language immersion program was brought up by several different groups, that they should have experience with that and also be able to improve it and move it forward. Being able to work with a diverse community, that came up over and over. Of course, experience with budgeting and finance, experience with a large but also a fast-growing district, experience with building and facilities, experience with strategic planning. It was important to pretty much every group that they have some past classroom experience so that they could understand what teachers and students are going through. And it probably needs to be pretty recent classroom experience because the last 2 years have been so different with COVID. On 16, again, some issues that they brought up that they might want to or might need to deal with when they get here. Balancing autonomy in schools and district-wide goals, discipline and emotional issues, education crisis post-COVID, equity for students, expectations in respect of culture and tradition of the community came up several times. Diversity, again, came up. Foreign language immersion and the special education program came up a lot, that a lot of people felt that it needed to be looked at. Safety issues, racial issues and concerns in the district, teacher recruitment and retention, transportation issues. And then several groups mentioned that whoever comes in will need to work to earn back the trust of the community. Then starting on page 17, it's a breakdown of the online survey. Again, over 2,500 people took it. On page 17, it shows you a breakdown. you know, the majority of the people who took it were parents. And what I did, you know, that shows you a breakdown of the different people groups, so to speak. I took each question, the first thing you will see is how the entire group responded. And you'll see out of 2,586 people, there are 13 people who didn't want to tell you what group they were a part of. So they skipped the question. So, but they answered the other questions. So the first thing you will see is how the entire group ranked those 10 items. Skilled communicator came out as number 1, and when you look at the entire group. Then I broke it down by group. You have administrators, community members, parents on page 18. Page 19 shows how the students responded, support staff, and the teachers. Then the third question, and you'll see a lot of it, it's skilled communicator is important, number 1 for everyone, except community members live within the district and willing to make a long-term commitment was number 1. But they're similar, but you can see how the different groups responded. Then the third question was which path or strategy.
And Judith, you mind if I interrupt you?
Sure.
So board, I find it very encouraging that if you look at our administrators, parents, and students, after skilled communicator, then the very next thing is they wanted a commitment to ensuring strong, our administrators, I misspoke, and teachers, they wanted demonstrate a strong background in curriculum and instruction. So there's a hunger there from our team to get back to that. And then from our students, parents, they wanted the strong accountability measures for principals and teachers towards student achievement results. So it sounds like both sides are trying to attack the same paradigm that we've identified as a board, is to close those gaps, which is good.
Right, that is very good. Then the last question on the survey was which direction should they take? And again, I did all participants and then I broke it down by group. And all of them felt like find a candidate with the same basic educational and management philosophy as the current administration, but who can make some necessary changes. So it's like no one wanted to scrap the whole plan and start over, which I thought was pretty good. Then the meat of the report, and this is where you will need the coffee. Pages 22 through 93 are comments that were submitted. A lot of them, dealt with, where they should focus, problems that need to be addressed. We kind of left it all in there. So you will see page 22 through 90, well, actually it goes to page 94. Then at every meeting, I told people, I said, if you feel like you can't speak in front of the people here, or if you think of something when you leave here, here's my email address. Please feel free to email me. So page 94 through 96 are some emails that I received. And again, I'm not going to read it to you, but that's some very good information. You've got staff members and community members, business leaders, parents who are very passionate about the education in this district, and they want to be involved. So, but with that, I give you that is an overview, and that's don't read it right before you go to bed. It might keep you up, or it could put you to sleep. But it's very interesting to see.
I'm going on a cruise in a couple weeks, and I'm looking forward to sitting by the pool with a cocktail reading this.
A cocktail would be good.
No, this is excellent. I mean, such a great volume of information.
And Madam Chair, I'd just like to say too, because we've done numerous searches over the years, and I just wanted to let you all know that I think the information that you all sought in terms of public input probably ranked at the top as far as our experience and past searches. So I want to commend you for going the extra step on that.
Great. Thank you. Board, does anyone have any questions for any of our folks from SCSBA about the survey results? I know it's a lot to put your eyes on and formulate questions about. Anybody have any questions?
So from a survey perspective and the number of participants, would you consider this to be adequate? Would you consider it to be above par, below par? Where would you kind of rank our level of participation?
Over 2,000 people, that was an excellent response.
Right.
Probably, and doing this for 13 years, maybe only one or two other times have I had over 2,000. I mean, some community, now I know it's different when you have a very small district, but 500 to 700 people to participate is a good participation. So this was excellent.
Good. Yeah, and looking at, I mean, kudos to the parents. They represent almost 1,400 participants of the 2,000. So, I mean, it's great that we see that level of engagement. I mean, I think obviously from a student perspective, I mean, you poll 100 students, they might be able to tell you who the superintendent is. I mean, it's just one of those things that, they, and to timing of the year, come at the end of a school year and that kind of stuff. Had school been in session, we might would have seen a little higher number, but excellent report from the parents and obviously from the administration and staff.
Well, that's indeed, staying with that math, I noticed that a third of our employees responded. So if you add all that together, it's 1,100, so which is great. So thank y'all.
What were the dates that the survey was open?
As soon as we opened up the search, it opened the day after, so it was open over a month. It was probably about 5.5
Like
weeks.
mid-May to mid-June, right?
Yeah.
We even resent the link.
Yeah, a couple times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we had, they resent the link, it was posted on your website. I had several people contact me, and so, I mean, it was out there, which was good, so.
Yeah, I think that everybody had ample opportunity to participate. And again, I think that goes to the commitment that you all made to make sure to throw a wide net and get that information from input.
Now, talking about timeline a little bit, the candidates, could you just give me a ballpark of where we are on that?
Madam Chair, the application process closed yesterday afternoon. And I will tell you all, as of 5 o'clock yesterday, you have had, there were 13 applications that were submitted, and you all did get there's some good candidates in that mix.
Well, and I was just going to throw out there, because we established that as the closing date when we thought we were going to be meeting in July. And so, I mean, is there any will on the board to maybe extending the deadline for a couple weeks, since we're not going to meet again until the 1st of August, and give some folks an opportunity maybe that haven't already submitted an application? I mean, I'm kind of agnostic on it, but does anybody else?
Well, the question is, how much time do y'all need to process and tee up a summary of the applicants? I mean, to put the packet together?
Well,
Is it a week?
that may be more of a Dr. Moore question, but from the logistical standpoint, from our view, it really would be no harm nor foul if you wanted to take that course.
No, we didn't really vote on the timeline, so it would just be.
Madam Chair, I know of at least one other candidate that has not applied that I would like to reach out to, and if we could extend it, if just another week.
I mean, because we're not going to meet again with y'all until August 3rd, I think, or 2nd.
Second.
Second. And so, does anyone else?
Well, let Dr. Moore, so
Okay, yes, I'm
what's the
sorry.
process?
I was gonna say, I think it's a good idea to extend it. Since you're not meeting in July, I'd run it a couple more weeks out there at least and see, because like you said, there might have been some folks thinking about it. But, putting an application packet together too takes a little while to compose that. And then on our end, once whatever, if you extend it a couple weeks, then really within a week or two, we
Yeah.
can have all that ready to go to meet with you in August.
Really, as
to
long
come
as
in,
as we
yeah.
have a week, that way because as I get them, starting, since it just closed yesterday, next week I'll start doing telephone interviews.
Because my thought is that maybe some folks that maybe might have wanted to apply, maybe they're just surfacing from the school year, and their head is just above water, and maybe this is gives them a chance to do that. So I mean, is anybody opposed to extending it a
I'm
couple
not
weeks?
sure it matters, but I don't want us to send the wrong message to those 13 candidates that applied, and they say, well, they opened it back up. So
Right, and this isn't a commentary on the quality of the candidates, because I don't know, but you've said that it's.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying on that, but probably because of the timing on this one, I don't think people would understand. Particularly if one of the applicants called Judy and said, why are they doing that? I think the response could be, well, the board's not even meeting in July. They just decided to leave it
I
open for
think,
a couple
if we
extra
could
weeks.
communicate that would
Yeah,
be-
yeah. So I don't think that would hurt you in the
And
process.
in discussions, to go along with that, in discussions that I've had with some of the folks who have applied, I have basically told them that there could be some change in the timeline a little bit, so that's something that they would not be unexpected.
Okay.
And one of the qualifications I read in the list of things was to have thick skin. This would be a good opportunity to show that.
Well, and if we can repulse then y'all's communication of soliciting applicants, because obviously we set a deadline and, I've done a variety of searches and it's nice to repulse it in the middle of that search window because a couple other people may jump it. So if y'all can add that to your plan. But again, I think July 25th, if we extended it 4 weeks, would then give them a week to get ready, if that's what you need, Judith or Dr. Moore.
I think that'd work.
Okay, because July 25th would be 8 days before our August 2nd meeting.
Right.
So.
Dr. Guyton, do you have any thoughts?
Do a majority of, and this is probably a little more of a challenging question, as far as fiscal year is concerned, do most of your districts across the nation, do they follow a similar fiscal year as us, or is it just all over the place?
It's a wide variance.
I would think most, though, would follow the same
Right.
fiscal year.
Okay.
But again, I'm no expert on that because I haven't looked across the country, but I think that'd probably be more the norm as opposed to running off
Sure.
of a different.
Sure. And the reason I bring that up, obviously, I assume we're probably not the only state encountering similar conversations with the state regarding funding models and those kind of things, just with the surplus of money that's in the economy right now. And so, I think there's a singular focus that occurs, and as a superintendent, I could envision that they just mentally kind of want to get past, budget year, budget season, and we're running it up till, June 28th right now, still making amendments on ours because we have to. And so I can imagine there's a singular focus that occurs that once they've completed that step, then they can maybe take a step back and say, okay, let me sort of rethink, revisit. Maybe they got a vacation in there and they got to recreate an idea. Who knows? Yeah. I think it's, I think anytime we can increase our pool size within a dedicated movement forward, then I think it's always a win. But I agree with Tim. I think there is some consideration and at least some communication that has to go back to the current applicants. This by no means is any sort of reflection. The board has not even seen you. So this is merely just based off the logistics of the timing of our meetings, so on and so forth.
And I would just add on to what Mr. Oswald and Dr. Guyton said. The teacher in me thinks about, well, there was a deadline set. People worked hard to meet that deadline. And now we're extending it so people have an extra month to work on their application and make sure it's nice and shiny. And so could we consider when you reach out to the previous applicants that we say, if there's anything you'd like to add or tweak to your application, you may do that. So.
Throw the board under the bus. We changed our timeline on y'all. It has nothing, no reflection of SCSBA.
Thoughts on that? No? Okay. Okay. All right, so,
Okay.
sounds like there's agreement there.
July 25th, I'm hearing.
I think that's,
If a week's enough, I mean, y'all need to tell
Oh,
us.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
yeah, super.
Thank y'all.
All right. Is there anything else that tidbits of information that we need to know as we consume this?
Nope, I think that's it.
All right. Thank y'all very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you all.
All right, while they're packing up, we'll move right along, keep our train moving down the tracks. The next item on the agenda is our discussion with our incoming interim superintendent, Dr. Jarita Postlethwaite. And she is going to kind of lead this conversation as we talk about priorities and goals for that interim time period. So take it over.
I want to thank the board for giving me this opportunity to serve your community. I don't know if I will be here for 6 weeks or 6 months, but while I'm here, and I will dedicate every ounce of expertise that I have into serving Lexington 1. It's a well-regarded district, highly respected around the state, and it's a privilege to be here. So I want to thank you for this opportunity and thank the staff members who've met with me to help me get a little bit acclimated so that I could even have a place to start as I think about this discussion. So I'll share with you some initial thoughts that I have, and then it's, of course, your district. You know it much better than I, and you will be able to say, I think you're on target here, I think you've missed that, and perhaps here's where we don't think this is a reasonable 6-month goal. So I've tried to think in terms of the first quarter and the second quarter. So if we think about what our priorities are, I think it starts with a discussion about our roles, our respective roles. And on the left, I placed a diagram from a nonprofit organization that just talks about 5 key roles of the board. Lead strategically, think far into the future. What is it that we want to accomplish, and stick with the big picture? And you've done a great job of ensuring financial stability. The role of the board member, the superintendent, and all employees, as far as I'm concerned, is to be an ambassador for the district, but that's particularly important for the board as we, as someone mentioned, strengthen our credibility in the community. The next, of course, would be a personal favorite, support and supervise the executive director, and then ensure healthy governance. And I think the Lexington 1 board has done a good job of setting that example over the years. You've been a district that all superintendents across the state have envied and have would have been pleased to work for. So one way to think about this is above the line and below the line, and that's what I'm showing on the right. The more the board is able to focus on setting impactful strategic goals and then monitoring the staff's progress toward meeting those goals, the more progress we'll likely be able to make. That frees up the staff to work on these things below the line, which is implementing your strategic priorities and taking care of the day-to-day operations. And there's an inverse relationship. The more the board focuses on things below the line, the less the staff is able to address the things above the line. And that's a really important point for a governing body to understand it, because you get so many questions about those day-to-day things below the line, you're automatically pulled in the direction of the day-to-day operations, when in fact the great value you bring to the district is keeping the focus on the big picture and those big accomplishments that we need to achieve for students. The next slide simply acknowledges that there are goals in your strategic plan. The first is, of course, it's the main mission, increasing the percentage of students who are ready to graduate, ready to take a productive place in the community when they're graduated from our schools. The second is about strategies involving equity, and we heard that mentioned in the feedback. The third involves increasing performance in high-level coursework. That fits, of course, with the first and second strategic goals. The fourth is about advocacy for every single student, particularly around these issues that keep students from being able to engage in learning well. And we heard a presentation about how the board may be able, how the district may be able to increase the kinds of supports you're providing for students in next year's budget. Number 5 is helping personnel focus on learning how to improve student achievement, what it is we as educators will do that engage more students so that they are willing to learn. In college, we used to get that backwards. They used to teach us about the intellectual or the cognitive engagement, and now more and more people are realizing that if students aren't motivated or don't have a purpose to learn or don't feel valued in a classroom, they're less likely to learn at high levels. And then finally, critically important, is the need to always focus on customer service, engaging parents, and involving our community. There's been a lot of discussion these past couple of years about engaging parents, what that means, and how to make sure that they understand the curriculum that we're offering, the kinds of settings that we're providing, and how we're dealing with issues that are critically important to them. So sort of taking off then from the goals of the strategic plan, after an admittedly very short period of time, there are a few high-level recommendations for your consideration as the staff and I work together over the next 3 to 6 months to keep the school district moving in the positive direction you've set, and to ensure that there's a very smooth transition for the next superintendent. So for the board, it's focusing on the superintendent search, and I must say you have a very, very ambitious timeline. I think it's absolutely right. You may not find a person who's able to start immediately, but finding the right person is, as you know, the most important thing you will do for Lexington One. While you're doing that, the staff, in conjunction with the board, needs to really drill down on addressing the learning loss or these readiness gaps. We know from the Cognia report that we had readiness gaps prior to COVID. COVID has exacerbated those gaps, but they existed prior to COVID. So we really need to understand what the analytics are on those gaps. That doesn't mean just sharing a bunch of data with the board. It means telling you, as we analyze these data, these are the things we believe need to be done to address the students who need to grow more than a year. Because if you're below grade level, 1 year's growth isn't enough for you. And often our students who are below grade level aren't growing 1 year per year academically anyway. So it's really thinking about the parts of the system, how they work together, how they were designed, and whether that design is adequate to meet the needs of today's students. So that takes a lot of time, and it means we need to involve teachers, and that teachers then would engage parents, particularly in the discussions with the families of children who are not currently on grade level and who need some interventions in order to get there. The next bullet then deals with the targeted academic strategies that we would use to ensure annual growth and then to invest extra resources for makeup growth. If you're 3 years behind, obviously you have to grow 1 1/3 years over 3 years to get caught up. It's almost impossible to catch up that growth in 1 year, so we need longer-term strategies than we've traditionally thought about in the past. We want to revisit NTSS. We're awful at using acronyms in education. We're almost as bad as the military, but probably all of you know that stands for multi-tiered systems of support. It's where a group of individuals meet when a student isn't doing well and talk about the proper interventions and then meet again to see if those interventions are working. So we need to look again at our system of intervention strategies and our instructional models to see if they are effective, and if they aren't, to find those models that are more effective. Not listed here, but sort of implied in all of this would be looking at our ability to offer early childhood opportunities, to expand them. And that is a complex matter because it takes not only the resources to do that. We think we qualify for some additional resources. It takes space, so we need the facilities folks. We have to be able to organize and offer transportation. We have to be able to hire the teachers to do it. And then we need the instructional program designed to make sure that whatever that program is that preschool students are exposed to is actually accelerating their growth in appropriate ways. So it's not on there, but it is something that we will be looking at. From the board's presentation last time, there's a lot of work to properly merge the programs and resources that are going to be at North Lake Community Learning Center. There are a lot of different things that could mesh well together, that could support each other with symbiotic relationships, but that won't happen unless we plan for it and work hard to see that it happens. On the next slide, we continue. Again, I remind you, the list isn't complete and it's based on limited input. I had some time to meet with several principals, but I did not have an opportunity to meet with students, parents, or other community members or employees. But we definitely need to work on these 4 areas. One is reviewing the construction program status and the technology refresh plans. There are some big decisions to be made about the technology refresh plan and how we're going to have a 5 or 6 year replacement cycle built in so that this doesn't hit us all at once next time. When I talked to each board member individually, one of you suggested this, and I took a look at the agenda that you mentioned, was with our agendas to identify which strategy are we working on or which budget priority. Because if it's not a strategy or budget priority related or something related to the work that you are to do according to board policy, it probably doesn't belong on the agenda. So on the agenda, I think it would be a good idea for us to designate why is this on here, toward what end. Of course, this could have been listed as the number 1 priority: reinforce the safety and security protocols and preparedness with all of our employees, our students, and our collaborating agencies. We've learned a lot. The board heard a report about that in executive session, but no plan is going to be effective unless those who have to implement it know what to do on a day when they least expect it. And so it's that kind of preparedness that we need to make sure that we have instilled across our system. And then the final one I listed was to develop strategies to address any staffing shortages. It sounded as though we've made tremendously impressive progress in hiring over the past few weeks, and hopefully we'll be able to close all of the vacancies. But in the event that that doesn't happen, we need to have a good plan around the 1st of August about how we're going to handle any shortages and what what opportunities that might actually offer in terms of facilities, what extra burdens it may create on personnel. So my final slide is just a summary of some important points that I am thinking about for this interim period. These may or may not be consistent with the board's thinking, but the advantage of being interim is I can tell you exactly what I recommend, and you can reject it, or we'll still be friends at the end of the day. So I think an opportunity that we have is to form a habit of exercising disciplined thought and action as we ensure our work is purposeful and impactful. And this is the hardest thing to do. It's a relentless intentionality in support of teaching and learning, because the complaints, we could fill up our entire work days and your entire board week responding to complaints. And some of those complaints are really important to know about, and they keep us from making mistakes or correcting mistakes. But a lot of the complaints we receive really don't help us move down the road, improve, and innovate in ways that contribute to student achievement. So a challenge for all of us is to be very disciplined. Disciplined thought, disciplined people, disciplined action toward teaching and learning supports and improvements. I think a second thing that's important for all boards and educators, particularly those who are in positions to lead and support teachers, is to recognize how difficult the past 2 years have been for students, their families, educators, the board, and the community as a whole. And as we have put in place some mitigation strategies to deal with the situations we faced the past 2 years, we have let some things slide a little. We need to pay attention to those things, but we also need to do everything we can to build teacher morale and to ensure that they know that they have our full support without losing any of the momentum that we have underway. And then finally, and obviously, we want to do everything we can to assure a smooth leadership transition. So I wouldn't want the board to go off in a direction you're uncomfortable with just because I suggested it, but that we form a very, very strong, unified leadership team that involves school principals and teachers, that we know who we are, what we're about, what the Lexington One Way is, so that we can continue to keep this district at the top of the minds of people and at the top of the high respect and high regard, high achievement outcomes that have been part of Lexington One historically. So I have reached the end of anything I have to say at a pretty high 30,000-foot level, except to say that once we've identified these priorities, by the 1st of August, working with the senior leadership team and others, if this is generally the direction in which the board would want to go, we would want to bring back a list of deliverables so that you know at the end of 3 months, if we want to achieve these things, what should we have accomplished in 3 months, so that you know what's on target, what's in trouble, and where the timelines are that we're going to have to revise. So sort of like green light is good, yellow is caution, we've got some problems with this that we didn't anticipate, and red light is we're not going to make this deadline, and here's why. So we're going to need to develop a contingency plan. But if we do that very intentionally in 3 months or quarterly segments, I think it will keep us on track in a very intentional way that wouldn't necessarily be important if you were already knew you were going to be working with long term. So those are my suggestions for your consideration based on cursory observations. So, thank you.
All right. I'm going to just give everybody a chance to ask any questions, and feel free to engage in conversation. Ms. Henson, do you have any questions or I always start with you, but right to left. My right to left. Okay, all right. All right, let's start this way. Does anyone have any questions?
I can start.
All right, go ahead, Mr.
I
Oswald.
thought it was very refreshing to hear about intentional, relentless, intentional focus, because sometimes we get so bogged down with complaints. I mean, I describe it as running through quicksand. We're trying to get to the goal, but we can't get there because we listen and we're not filtering anything. And I think as educators and leaders, we certainly have to listen to everybody's concerns, but there's a measure of filtering things out so we can move on toward our goal. And it was refreshing to hear that. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson, yeah.
I don't have any questions, but Dr. Postlewaite, I'm just well pleased and actually pretty excited that you are here to hit the ground running, and your goals look to be absolutely in line with what we are looking at doing going forward. And like you said, we don't know if you'll be here 6 weeks or 6 months, but you're obviously ready to meet the task, and we appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
So I also like, again, the targeted goals, and you mentioned this, but I want to make sure it's top of mind for your team. But again, the emotional and social health, not only of our students, and having intentional interventions to help address that, because I think, again, we can't meet every need, right? But the things that we can meet the masses of our children, so that then they can focus the energy and time on instruction. And the flip is also true, the emotional health of our staff, because the more, and again, we can't meet every need. I mean, it's kind of like the hospital and other infrastructures in our community. I mean, there's so many needs out there. We got to be strategic and targeted about it. But if we can help our staff and teachers to be less distracted, and distracted is the wrong word, but able to focus more on instruction, I think both sides of that coin will win. So just thinking about emotional health interventions for both our students and our staff that get them back to a more stable place so that they can focus on the task at hand. I think that would help our staffing shortages and retention, because it's great to hire, but if we don't hold on to them because they don't find a warm welcome handshake or environment, then we're just hiring right back into it. It's that quicksand analogy. So, but I'm very excited about this, so thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you for the work up until now and for the continued work. You do bring up a very interesting point about obtaining analytics on gaps. And for me, that's, I guess I'm a little bit of an engineered thinking, where I think about where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. And it's very hard to know where we're going unless we know where we are. And so with that, obviously, we have to have data, but we also have to have good data. And that can be the challenge, I think. I think that's where the rub can meet as to what we can identify as good data versus bad data. And really, I think there's two types of data. There's a global data that exists, and then I think it goes as far down as the individual learner. I think as a district, we have been, you use a term, relentless intentionality. I think that has been a focus as to try to get to the lowest common denominator with regard to the individual educational experience of a child, because it's going to vary. Even within my 3 children at home, there's a wide array of the individual educational experience, and what's important to them versus what's not, and where they are and where they're going. So I really am interested to see how we can ascribe a number to that, and that's the challenge. I mean, you use a term like 3 years behind, and so that sounds realistic to me. It would sure be nice to have the data that says this is where we can reliably pull this number from. And I know That's the challenge. Secondly, I really like the idea of sort of revamping even our agenda. You know, this is, again, with an intentionality, it starts from even the framework in which you work. And so I absolutely agree the board's focus should be on strategic goals. Therefore, when we meet, we should be addressing those strategic goals within that framework, not trying to shove the strategic plan within the framework of how we've kind of always done it. So I really like the idea, and you know, I've got a little bit of a crazy artist in me. I'm fine with scrapping it all over and repainting, you know, and so I think to take the agenda as it exists and to say, okay, let's rethink even how we approach our meetings, I think again points towards that intentionality that you're getting at. So, no, very helpful information, and thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Kyle on the agenda. I look forward to doing some work on that. I just wanted to thank you for this. Some words that stuck out with me are review, revisit, identify, and address. And I appreciate the fact that there's going to be some kind of structure, and we're going to be able to analyze some things and dig deeper into things. So thank you for that. Another thing you mentioned, you said we may not find someone to start immediately in our superintendent search. So I guess this is a question for the board. Have we considered extending the start date as we look for applicants? Because I know Kyle has addressed this extensively. Maybe saying July of next year or later this, January, February. So that way, those superintendents that are currently under contract in their own district.
And I think we actually have talked about like maybe naming a superintendent in the fall and they start in January or February. I think that's what has kind of been what we've talked about at previous meetings.
Okay.
Would be they would. It's not like they would accept the position and they start 2 weeks later. We're at the level of professional that we're seeking. It's more of a 3 to 6 month negotiation with them of, when can you start? What works for your current board and your current district? What works for us? And so, yeah, that's kind of been the.
Okay, even if they're under contract, until June 30th, whenever.
Right. Right.
Maybe make that clear that we don't expect you to walk out in the middle of your contract.
No, that was never the intention.
And I do think that's a valid point. And I even actually had written down a very similar, what are we communicating in terms of potential applicants as a start date? Because I do think, so in this packet that we received from South Carolina School Board Association, one of the things I saw continually over and over and over was integrity, integrity, integrity. And I think for a lot of people, a contract is a sign of integrity. And so for some of these applicants, not being able to fulfill their commitment of a 1-year term would almost feel like they were compromising their integrity. I could envision that. And so, from my standpoint, if we found the right person, regardless if they started in January or started in July, now obviously I'm answering for you a little bit in that, 6 weeks, 6 months, maybe 12. So I think the board should give consideration to the start date, that it is an open-ended type. And I think that's what you're getting at. That
Yes.
This is an open-ended
Yes, I mean, 'cause
discussion. It's not
that's
a
correct.
hard fast.
And in my conversation with Scott several weeks ago after we set our timeline, I think that what they're communicating is, and the expectation is, again, because of the level of professional executive that we will be seeking, that once we identify this is the person, then they're going to be part of that conversation. What is their what do they feel is the appropriate timeframe. And it could be January, it could be June. But I think when we find the right person, that conversation will take place with that person and the board, and determine that together. I don't think we can set that start date until we know who the person is, because I think that to get the right person, we're going to need to be flexible on the start date.
But I'm just curious, have we communicated that to the applicants?
Yes, that they have said that, yes. Anything else, Ms. Garris? No? Okay. Thank you very much. This was wonderful. I'm very excited about it. I personally love the idea, or the plan to meet with the staff and set deliverables. I'm a checklist person, and I love, having deliverables as a way to have a to-do list. And I think that's going to be very helpful for us to know, and kind of gauge and be a part of that conversation of what's happening day to day, when y'all provide that feedback to us. So I think that's going to be wonderful.
But as a board, we need to be flexible, because again, we don't know what tomorrow holds. So again, I think you make plans based on what you know, and you adjust. So we need to give grace to the team.
We're all getting real flexible.
Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
All right, board, I believe that we're, anything else for Dr. Postlethwaite before we move on? Thank you very much for being here and for putting that document together. That was very helpful to us. All right, just as a reminder, at our last board meeting, the board approved a change in time for our July board meeting, which is scheduled on July 19th. We will be meeting at 8:00 a.m. To conduct just a few quick items of business, primarily employment recommendations, but evidently there are a few things we need to do to get ready to start school too. So, Ms. Gaskins is so nice, and so we've agreed to do that now. No, very important, timely things that we'll take care of that morning, but it should be brief, and we'll just get the business done. So, and so there will be no citizens' participation at that meeting as well. And then we will be meeting, as we discussed with SESBA, we will be meeting with them on August 2nd in a special meeting to receive the list of candidates and to determine at that time who we will select as semifinalists. So we'll start moving forward at a quicker speed at that point in time. So do I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Madam Chair, let me take a point of privilege here to remind everybody that we do have an important runoff election in our community today. Please go vote. And with that, I move that we adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Oswald. Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Have a great July 4th weekend.